how many of you would say that softball and baseball are like the same thing, but just separation between boys and girls? Well, although separation may be true, they're definitely different in many ways. Today I want to contrast for you the differences between college softball and college baseball, and to give you a better understanding of why they're so different. I have over 15 years of experience with both the sports, and I've played them both, but I did more research to give you more statistical information. Although not everyone may be into sports, we've probably all seen like a baseball or softball game in our life, and there's different levels, but I'm going to relate it to just college and tell you from there. Today I'm going to show you the comparisons between the fields, the balls, the bats, and the distances in bases and pitching. Okay, so as you can see, the softball field definitely looks smaller than a baseball field. For softball field, from home to left or right field, fence is about 190 feet out, and from home to center it's about 220 feet out. And for a baseball field, it's from home to left or right fence is 320 to 350 feet, and from home to center it's about 400 plus feet. The reason why the fences are so much farther is because the density of the ball for softball is less than baseball, so it's a lot harder to hit. Okay, so the ball, thank you. And for softball, as you can tell, there's a big obvious difference between the two. A softball is like a yellowish green, and it's with red stitching, and the baseball is white with red stitching. The softball goes about 12 to 11 inches in circumference, and like I said before, it's less dense. And the baseball is about 9 inches in circumference. And yeah. Okay, so as you can tell, the barrel of the bat, which is that part, is a lot bigger on a baseball bat than a softball bat. The maximum diameter for the barrel of a softball bat is about 2 1/4 inches, and the diameter for the sweet spot, which is just the big chunky part for the baseball bat, is only made out to be 2 3/4 inches to the max. And for putting all that together, for the pitching, the most obvious thing for pitching is definitely underhand pitching for softball. We're a lot closer. It's about 43 feet from the home plate, and from baseball, it's about 60 feet, 6 inches away from home plate, and they throw overhand. They're a lot more likely to have injuries in baseball because of the overhand, because your arm is naturally supposed to go underhand. And the distances between the bases, for a softball, for each base, it's 60 feet apart, but for baseball, it's 90 feet apart. But then again, at the same time, a baseball does go farther when you hit it, so, I mean, it just makes sense to make the bases a lot farther apart. So, overall, I consider softball to be a lot more challenging because it's more fast-paced, but there are many more differences in the game, but you need to know the whole background. But for the information I gave you today about the field, the ball, the bats, pitching, and the base distances, next time a person says, oh, softball and baseball are totally the same, you could tell them they're wrong because of all this information. Thank you.
All right, JT, why don't you tell us what you think, and make sure to speak up because your voice needs to be picked up on the camera.
She presented it well. She was pretty organized. She brought us in with the attention device by asking us a question in that kind of way. She stated her thesis and gave us a preview of what she was going to say. She supported it with both contradicting points of baseball and softball. Her organization was well. Her visual aids helped us out with the bats and the balls and the field as it is. And the only thing I'd say is probably a little bit longer. And that's all I got right now. It was pretty quick.
All right.
This is the only one I pulled off, so I didn't see the written. Yeah, it's just the numbers you said.
All right, Stephanie. I tried to say it before. I'm not a big fan of the rhetorical question survey attention device because it really feels like it's something that's less planned than one of the other attention devices. But what you had worked. It was okay. It's the first speech that we're doing that way. So I think you could have something a lot more interesting, but it does draw us into the topic. You're very good at identifying what the topic is. We know what your specific purpose statement is going to be. I think you need to give us a better justification for why you're talking about this. I like the fact that you tell us about your experience, but how many people play softball? Are there organized leagues? How many diamonds are there that are softball-based versus baseball-based? Or do they play it at the same places and they just change where the bases are at the same location? There were a lot of things about what you're talking about that I think could have been a lot more interesting and it could have been a good justification for talking about the subject if you developed it a bit more. You're focused so much on the details of the field and the dimensions and the ball and the bats, for instance, that you forget to give it a context and try and keep it a little bit more involving. There's a good preview of what you're going to talk about, although it does feel like you're rushing through it and it's very basic. The definition of ideas and concepts are very clear. I know you've got a lot of experience that you're using, and I appreciate that, but I didn't get any source citations for some of the information about the distances on the bases, or, for example, about the distance that the balls travel. Here's a place where some experiences and examples could have been added to the speech to make it a little more interesting. Let's face it, you said that you've been playing, right? So why don't we get a good story about why you didn't hit a home run because you were hitting a heavier ball or playing in the wrong ballpark, or you grounded out on a regular basis, or if you're a pitcher, how fast you pitch, or there ought to be something like that, or something that makes it a little bit more than just reading the technical manual on the field. And as a result, that sounds like it's just dry. Now, the visuals I thought were integrated into speech pretty well. You use them to show the differences in the field, the differences in the ball, the differences in the bats, so all that's very clear and easy to see. I think that's another place where you could have maybe added something that would have added interest to it, for instance, would be the average distance that the ball travels when it gets hit, or if there's a difference in what kinds of plays there are in the two games, or errors or injuries or stuff like that. You mentioned, for instance, injuries for pitchers. They're much more likely to occur with baseball rather than softball because it's more natural for people to throw underhanded. Well, there's got to be some kind of information about that. An example of baseball players, even a couple of examples of baseball players who, tore a rotator cuff or something like that, and how infrequently that occurs with softball. I think that would have added a little bit more to it. So there's some things in this that I think work really well. The visuals especially, it's nicely organized. Your transitions need to be a little bit smoother though, and that was one of the things that I had a little bit of a problem with, because it really felt like you just rushed into the next point, and it should be a little bit smoother as you're going from one idea to the next. And you're letting the visuals help organize the information too, which is not a bad idea, but your language